reading the summary of the previous paragraph. The third type of knowledge, that is counting from the top. Okay. So the third type of knowledge, just 1 second. Yeah. The third type of knowledge counting from the top is direct separative knowledge. It is direct without use of senses, but it is separative. What you get in the intraconscious. When subject and object drift sufficiently apart so that the difference between the two is pronounced, we have the third way of knowledge, separative but direct. Why direct? Because subtle senses are used, but not the gross senses. Identity is still present. Identity with the thoughts or the emotions, okay, not the full being. But it is first overcoated, then submerged, and finally replaced by separation. At last, identity no longer exists and subject and object become separate. Yet, direct penetration of object by subject takes place and contents of object are revealed to the subject. Okay. Intimate oneness no longer exists, but a sense of mutuality, connectedness remains. Power of inclusion and penetration are present, but it is no longer within oneself. Object is now external to subject. This direct separative knowledge is a normal cognition of the subliminal being, but almost unknown to the external nature of body, life, mind. Okay? Very what you say. In the interconscious or the subliminal consciousness, you do get the direct separative knowledge. If you can have the power of going into your interconscious or into your inner being, remember the inner being, the subliminal being, and the intraconscious are all the same. Okay? Only different words are being used. When you go deep into yourself, not above, but into yourself, horizontally, then that is the inner being. And it is also called the subliminal, and it is also called the intraconscious in cerebral language. So this is what you said in the previous one. Now we start reading the paragraph beginning with this first separative ignorance. Because we are coming from top, remember, we are going from top. Absolutely at the top, knowledge by identity, number 1. Little below, knowledge by identity starts becoming a little less intense and more diluted. That is number 2. Okay. Number 3 is what we read just now, direct knowledge but separated. What it means is that if I am looking into, let us say I am looking at Yasmin, I can see her thoughts. So there is a certain identity, but not fully with Yasmin, but only part of her mind, or it could be part of her emotions. So that is direct but separated. So now who will read this first separative ignorance? Sunki, you have the text? Yeah, please.
Yes. Yes.
Read the paragraph.
Okay. This first separative ignorance is evidently still a play of knowledge, but of a limited separative knowledge, a play of a divided being, working upon a reality of underlying unity and arriving only at an imperfect result or outcome of the concealed oneness. The complete intrinsic awareness of identity and the act of knowledge by identity belong to the higher hemisphere of existence. This knowledge by direct contact is the main character of the highest supraphysical mental planes of consciousness, those to which our surface being is closed in by a wall of ignorance. In a diminished and more separative form, it is a property of the lesser supraphysical planes of mind. It is, or can be an element in all that is supraphysical. It is the main instrumentation of our subliminal self. It's a central means of awareness. For the subliminal self or inner being is a projection from these higher planes to meet the subconscious, and it inherits the character of consciousness of its planes of origin, with which it is intimately associated and in touch by kinship. In our outer being, we are children of the inconscious. Our inner being makes us inheritors of the higher heights of mind and life and spirit. The more we open inwards, go inwards, live inwards, receive from within, the more we draw away from subjection to our inconscient origin and move towards all which is now superconscient to our ignorance.
Okay. The language is very clear if you have the concepts clear. Okay, so we'll see what he's saying. I'll do one thing. I'll first, no, we'll do the summary last. Okay. So we'll go read each sentence carefully and see what he's saying. The first separative ignorance is evidently still a play of knowledge, but of limited separative knowledge. So the first separative is the third from the top, the second from the bottom. Okay. The first separative ignorance, separative ignorance is first. Okay. So it is evidently still a play of knowledge. Okay. The separative ignorance is the first, which is the third if you count everything from the top. Okay. I hope it is clear. Otherwise, the first separative ignorance may be confusing a little bit. The first is the non-separative knowledge, identity. Okay. The second is non-separative knowledge but reduced a little. Then the third one is what he's talking about, this first separative ignorance. It is separation, okay, and ignorance, because you don't know the whole. And I'm looking at Yasmin and I said, I don't know everything about her, but I know I can see her thoughts. So it is separative. It is some sort of knowledge, but it is ignorance of the whole, but there is still some sort of knowledge. Therefore, he's saying the first separative ignorance is evidently still a play of knowledge. After all, I'm coming to know our mind. No? So, but of a limited separative knowledge. Now, look at the separative ignorance. He's saying limited separative knowledge. Okay. So, it depends on, his language is very clear. We have to understand what he's saying. Ignorance because we are losing the identification. We are losing the identification, that's why ignorance. But if you look from the bottom, it's a knowledge because it is definitely better than the last one. Okay, so limited separative knowledge. A play of divided being working upon a reality of underlying unity and arriving only at an imperfect result or outcome of the concealed oneness. So, in other words, what he's saying is, at the bottom, which our normal consciousness is, it is ignorance and it is separative. Okay. It's completely, I don't know, I'm going on using Yasmin as my object. So, I don't know Yasmin at all, but I can see her body, mind, life. Okay. So, I can't see her mind, I can see her body. So, it is ignorance. But some sort of beginning of knowledge is there, only the outer. So that's what he's saying. It's a play of divide. Now, when I go to this second one, the separative but direct knowledge, it is still knowledge to a certain extent, but ignorance is there. So look at the language, it will be very clear. It's a play of divided being working upon a reality of underlying unity and arriving only at an imperfect result or outcome of the concealed oneness. So, from the bottom, level 1, I don't know Yasmin at all. I don't know what she is thinking. I don't know what emotions she is having. Okay? Ignorance. Then, when I go to the second level, which is separative separated direct knowledge. I come to know her thoughts, but I still don't know anything about her fully. Therefore, it is limited, separated knowledge. A play of divided being working upon a reality of underlying unity. In other words, the unity is starting to reveal itself. I know her thoughts. Okay, so already my thought is capable of entering into her thought. So this is the unity is slowly coming into the picture. That's what he said. Then arriving at but imperfect result or outcome of the concealed oneness. When you go to the third level from the bottom, the oneness starts becoming more and more obvious. There is a gradation. This complete intrinsic awareness of identity and the act of knowledge by identity belong to the higher hemisphere of existence. In other words, it is already higher hemisphere. It's not the lower hemisphere. The lower hemisphere is body, mind, life. Okay? And the higher hemisphere starts when your consciousness is able to see subtler things. Okay? So normally it's a higher mind, then a little higher element mind, intuitive mind, and finally over mind. So, third level, super mind. So knowledge by identity belongs to the higher hemisphere of existence. All human beings don't have that knowledge. That's what it means. This knowledge by direct contact is the main character of the highest supra-physical mental planes of consciousness. So you can have this direct separative knowledge at the higher mind level. Okay? That's what he's saying. The higher hemisphere. Remember, higher hemisphere is level 2. Okay, the spiritual planes of consciousness. Okay. This knowledge by direct contact is the main character of the highest supra-physical mental planes of consciousness. This knowledge by direct contact is the main character of the highest supra-physical mental planes of consciousness. Supra-physical, just above the superphysical. I wonder if you understand what he's saying. Highest supra-physical. Okay? That means the mental planes are beginning from the bottom. If you see, there is a physical mind, then there is a vital mind, then there is a pure mind. But these are all physical. Now the first highest supraphysical is the higher mind. So you have those you can start having the direct contact there. Those to which our surface being is closed in by a wall of ignorance. In other words, the higher hemisphere, even the higher mind, is closed. Level 2 is close to level 1. You have to go from level 1 to level 2, you have to go beyond the mind. That's what he's saying. Which our surface being. What is the surface being? Your body, your vital, and your mind. Normal mind is closed in by a wall of ignorance. In a diminished and more separated form, it's a property of the lesser supraphysical planes of mind. So, the lesser supraphysical planes of mind. So he's saying actually the direct is from the highest level, but it starts becoming less and less as it keeps coming down in the level 2 planes. The level 2, remember, there are 4 planes. The highest one, over mind. The slightly lower one, intuitive mind. Even slightly lower, element mind. And the lowest of the level 2 is a higher mind. So that's what he's saying. The lesser supraphysical planes of consciousness is coming down in a diminished form. It goes on coming down less and less and less. Direct knowledge is in the overmind. But there it is not separative anymore. It becomes even non-separative, even in the overmind. But when it keeps coming down, it gets diminished, and it becomes direct but separative knowledge. Okay? lesser supraphysical planes of mind. The phrase lesser supraphysical planes of mind, he is talking of the 4 planes of level 2. Okay? They are supraphysical, but they are lesser than the level 3. They are lesser than level 3. So overmind at the highest, then intuition, next lower, illusion, and finally higher. These are the lesser supraphysical planes of mind. It is or can be an element in all that is supraphysical. Can be. It can be, or it can be an element only in all that is supraphysical. In other words, you can have direct separative knowledge. It is the main instrumentation of our subliminal self. But in the intraconscient, it is the main. That's what self is. In the supraphysical planes, it can be, you can even have direct, non-separative touches of it. That's what is meaning. But the main instrumentation, the subliminal, is the direct separative knowledge. It's central means of awareness for the subliminal self or inner being. Now see, note carefully, he is using the words interchangeably. Subliminal self or inner being is a projection from these higher planes to meet the subconscious, and it inherits the character of consciousness of its planes of origin with which it is intimately associated and in touch by kinship. So this sentence I will explain to you. The superconscious is the highest. Then when there is involution, there is a descent of the superconscious into the inconscient. But while it is coming, it goes like that. And the subliminal is in the middle, and then finally it reaches the subconscious and the inconscient. So the subliminal or the inner being, he is saying it is a projection. They are saying, if you, I don't know if your my image is clear to you. I don't know on your phone. Maybe you are not using, you're using only audition and not vision. So it comes like that. Highest, and then when it comes down like that in a circle, goes down. The intraconscient is the between the subconscious and the inconscient. Okay? It's the main instrumentation. What is the main instrumentation? Knowledge, direct knowledge, but separated. Its central means of awareness. For the subliminal self or inner being is a projection from these higher planes to meet the subconscious, and it inherits the character of the consciousness of its planes of origin. Something of the identity is still there, with which it is intimately associated. The intraconscient is, from the intraconscient, you can very easily go to the supraconscient in a certain sense, not very easily, but in a certain sense. When you have the psychic being open, you can certainly manage to get in touch with the self in the supraconscious. Okay? It's possible. And the two can even join. He says that the psychic being can join the self up. But the subliminal projection is always intimately associated with that. I'm reading the next sentence. In our outer being, which is outer being, the body, mind, life, the normal body, mind, life. We are children of the inconscious. We know nothing about our body, we know nothing about our vital, we know nothing about our mind, except the most superficial aspects. Our inner being makes us inheritors of the higher heights of mind and life and spirit. So the inner being is not the outer being. Outer surface being is ignorant. The inner being is much, much, much more knowledgeable than the outer being. Okay, the surface being. So that's what he's saying. Our inner being makes us inheritors of the higher heights of mind and life. The higher heights of mind, we have already discussed, level 2, and life and spirit. The more we open inwards, go inwards, live inwards. Now look at that, 3 sentences, okay? That's the 3 phrases. Open inwards. If you open inwards, you start getting touches of the direct knowledge. Go inwards, you are going, entering and living there for longer periods. Live inwards, you are settled inside. Remember, Srimdo says that for a spiritual life, you have to live within and not live without in your body, mind, life. So the whole attention, the inward becomes more alive than the outer. The inner is more real to you than the outer. That is the condition of yoga. Live inwards, receive from within. The more we draw away from subjection to our inconscient origin and move towards all, which is now superconscious to our ignorance. So, if you rise to the level 2, which is superconscious, but you can also go through the intraconscious to the so next, ignorance becomes complete. So, who has to read? One of you can read. Jasmine, you have the text? No. I don't think she has.
No, Life Divine, I don't have the book.
That's right.
Sorry.
So either, I think Archana, they can read if she has the text.
Okay, Rangadan.
Go ahead.
Ignorance becomes complete with the entire separation of being from being. The direct contact of consciousness with consciousness is then entirely weighed or heavily overlaid, even though it still goes on within our subliminal parts. Just as there is also, though wholly concealed and not directly operated, the underlying secret identity and oneness. There is on the surface a complete separateness, a division into self and not self. There is the necessity of dealing with the not self, but no direct means of knowing it or mastering it. Nature then creates indirect means, a contact by physical organs of sense, a penetration of outside impacts through the nerve currents, a reaction of mind and its coordinations acting as an aid and supplement to the activity of the physical organ. All of them methods of an indirect knowledge, for the consciousness is forced to rely on these instruments and cannot act directly on the object. To these means is added a reason, intelligence, and intuition, which seize on the communications thus indirectly brought to them, but all put all in order and utilize the data to get as much knowledge and mastery and possession of the not self as or as much partial unity with it as the original division allows to the separated being. This means these means are obviously insufficient and often inefficient, and the indirect basis of the mind's operations afflicts knowledge with a fundamental incertitude. But this initial insufficiency is inherent in the very nature of a material existence and of all still undelivered existence that emerges from the unconscious.
So, to summarize what he's saying in a very simple manner, at the highest level, there is total knowledge by identity. God knows everything because he himself is everything. So there is no question of he is not knowing anything. He is creating himself, and whatever he is creating in himself. So it is total knowledge. Man can also identify himself with that aspect. Okay. So then he becomes knowledge by identity. He knows what the divine is. Then at a slightly lesser level, okay, slightly lesser, the knowledge by identity starts becoming dimmer and dimmer. Okay. Then when you come down to the third level, it becomes even more dim, and part of the knowledge is there. You can see parts of the thoughts of others and emotions of others, but you don't know the whole. So the identity has become even less. When finally it comes down to this fourth level of our normal consciousness, identity is there, but it is hiding inside as a potential. So we have completely lost the identification, and ignorance, we are fully ignorant. That's what he's saying. Now, so then what happens? If you are fully ignorant, you can't know anything. So nature very kindly gives you senses. And these senses also are graded, mind you. Human beings have 5 senses. So we can hear, we can see, we can taste, touch, smell. Okay. So, but if you go down even slightly lower down, some animals don't have all the 5 senses. Okay. Snakes can't hear, and fish can't see sometimes at the lower levels. Okay. So it becomes less and less and less. Then insects. Okay. It becomes even less. So there are creatures with only 4 senses, 3 senses, 2 senses, 1 sense. Finally, even no sense is there at all, and total ignorance in the inconscient. So this gradation is what we are talking about here. Okay. So I'll do one thing. I'll read out the summary and then quickly we'll go through the. We've got time, we'll be able to do that. So what we'll just ignorance becomes complete when division between self and not self. I am the self, and to continue my image, Jasmine is a not self. She is not me. She is separate at the lowest level. At the highest level, she and me are one. Okay? But that is knowledge by identity. Ignorance becomes complete when division between self and not self, between subject and object is final. Okay? The sense of unity is there at the base, but not on the surface. Totally, it is missing on the surface entirely. Okay. And now I read the next paragraph of the summary. So, nature creates the instrumentation of physical senses to establish some connection between units of consciousness and object of consciousness. Now note that units of consciousness and object of consciousness. Units of consciousness, me and Yasmin, they are units of consciousness. Objects of consciousness, trees, animals, etc. They are objects of consciousness. Finally, objects of non-consciousness, you can say stones and rocks. Okay. These are creatures with 1 sense, others with 2 or 3 or more senses. In man, nature supplements this scanty data with reason, intuition, and imagination in order to organize, bring order, and better utilize the available information. Okay? Obviously, this is insufficient and flawed. There is a flaw. There is an error in it. This is the natural consequence of the ascent from the inconscient, whose character is division, ignorance, and tamas. So they must remember gradation. Huh? So the gradation is what is talking about. So now we have got a little bit of time. We have got 4 minutes. It's a very small para, not a very big one. So I'll read quickly the sentences. Ignorance becomes complete. I'm reading the first sentence of the para we have just now read. Ignorance becomes complete with the entire separation of being, from me and Yasmin. Okay, to give an example. The direct contact of consciousness with consciousness is then entirely veiled or heavily overlaid, even though it still goes on within our subliminal parts. It is there, but hiding inside. Okay? Just as there is also, though wholly concealed and not directly operating, the underlying secret identity and oneness. Everything is there inside, okay, but it is compressed. It is involved. That's an involution. Even the divine is there in us, but it is hiding. There is on the surface a complete separateness. On the surface, separateness, a division into self and not self, object and subject. Okay? There is the necessity of dealing with a not self, but no direct means of knowing it or mastering it. Nature then creates indirect means. So, nature is kind and does not allow total ignorance. It comes in and gives you senses. Nature then creates indirect means, a contact by physical organs of sense, a penetration of outward impacts through the nerve currents, a reaction of mind and its coordinations acting as an aid and supplement to the activity of the physical organs. All of them methods of an indirect knowledge. So here he is saying exactly what we want repeating. First of all, the senses are gathering data from outside. Then this data has to be understood. So it is sent to the brain. But how is it sent to the brain? By nerves, nerve currents. So this is the second. The means of knowledge in the physical world is, first of all, the senses, which collect the data and send it to the brain via nerves. And the brain then interprets, okay, and tells you what you're saying. And this interpretation is helped by reason, intuition, and these other things that he's talking about. Okay. Intelligence and intuition. There also he calls it the coordinating mind. Okay. Suppose I see a tree today, and after 10 days I see a tree, it's not a new experience anymore. It's a coordinating experience because I've already seen it. So that is the coordinating mind that does the work. And there memory comes in. Now remember, we had that huge chapter on memory and a very, very interesting one. Okay. So that memory also is part of the mechanism of knowledge. Okay. If memory is not there, your knowledge will become very much stultified. It will become very much diminished. So I am reading that sentence again carefully. You will see all the three are coming in. Senses, nerves, and brain. Nature then creates indirect means. A contact by physical organs of sense. Eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and touch. Skin. A penetration of outside impacts through the nerve currents. The nerves are taken. From each organ of sense, the nerves are going to the brain. Okay. A penetration of outside impacts through the nerve currents, a reaction of mind. The mind is reacting and interpreting. You can say the reaction of mind is interpretation. And its coordinations, acting as an aid and supplement to the activity of the physical organs. All of them methods of an indirect knowledge. Okay. So, here what is, and what are the coordinations? He will tell us, okay, or he already told us. Intelligence, memory, all these things. All of them methods of an indirect. For the consciousness is forced to rely. The consciousness is forced to rely on these instruments and cannot act directly on the object. So these means are added. Now these are the coordinations. Reason, intelligence, and intuition. Intuition, not in the sense, spiritual sense of the highest plane, but a vague sense of something. Okay? You get an intuition, you get some idea, and sometimes it is wrong, sometimes it is right. So that's what is saying by reason, intelligence, and intuition. By the way, reason and intelligence, are they the same thing or not same thing? Somebody may be very, very intelligent to understand things quickly, but he may not have reason, which is based on logic. Okay? Intelligent people are often illogical. So there is a difference between reason and intelligence and intuition, which sees on the communications. Sees on means understand. The communications are coming. The nerves are sending the communications. Okay. By communications, he means the sense data. Okay. Which sees on the communications, thus indirectly brought to them, put all in order and utilize their data to get as much knowledge and mastery and possession of the not self or as much partial unity with it as the original division allows, which is separated being. Sometimes each individual is built separately, and even in the outer being, there can be some sort of unity, partial unity certainly. These means are obviously insufficient and often inefficient. Our eyes may be defective, our ears may be defective, as is very obviously in my case, inefficient. And the indirect basis of the mind's operations afflicts knowledge with a fundamental incertitude. Everything that we experience in the physical world, there is absolutely no certitude of what we are seeing, hearing, smelling, or tasting, or touching. But this initial insufficiency is inherent in the very nature of the material existence. It's coming from inconscience. Inconscience is no means of knowledge at all. And of all still undelivered existence that emerges from the inconscience. So if you want to start from the bottom, inconscience is first total ignorance. Then slowly when it emerges, subconscious, and finally life comes into the picture matter. Then you have the phenomena of one sense, two senses, three senses, four senses, five senses. Then when you go to level 2, senses are not necessary anymore. Then level 3, even subtle senses are not necessarily knowledge by identity. Here's what he said. So, I think it's quite clear, no? As I told you, gradations. There were the gradations. Very interesting knowledge the divine has provided for a gradation from the highest to the lowest. And this gradation is for everything. It is for substance, it is for consciousness, it is for power, it is for honor. Okay. Knowledge. Everything is graded. So next time, that is tomorrow, we'll read the inconscience is an inverse reproduction. And what do you mean by that? Very interesting sentence. The inconscience is an inverse reproduction of the supreme superconscious. The highest and the lowest are joined by some common factors. We'll see that tomorrow. Okay? So it's 8:40, 8:39 actually. So we'll stop here today and we'll do this tomorrow. The inconscience is an inverse reproduction. So can I bid au revoir to all of you? Have a nice day.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you.
Au revoir. Goodbye. Have a nice. Meet you